uh, now introduce Mark Lysing, ABP Government Relations and Policy Lead, to provide an update on ABP Government Relations initiatives. Mark?
Hello all. I'll just share my screen. Can you see that, Howard?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, thanks. So my name is Mark Lysing. I'm the relatively new Government Relations and Policy Lead. I started in November, coming from Alberta Environment and Parks. So I'm going to just give you a list of some of the key topics we're going to go over. I can't get into everything we're working on, but these were some of the major projects we've been tackling. So business risk management, that has been definitely a key item for us, as well as public land grazing, coal, temporary foreign workers, and wildlife. So yeah, some of the other ones we might have looked at or we've been working on are melt, carbon tax. It's a lot of stuff. So first one we're going to talk about is Aggro Stability, and you've heard a little bit about this from Kelly's presentation and Brad's presentation. And the main ministry we've been working with is Alberta Agriculture and Forestry, as well as Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. So a little overall context is the BRM suite is up for renewal in 2023, which would include things like Aggro Stability, Aggro Invest, Aggro Recovery, such as the Set Aside program. And yeah, there's four. I can't think of the last one. But anyways, Bibeau, or the federal ag minister, brought forward a suggestion to change the Aggro Stability in the middle of its period, which is unprecedented. So that's a good opportunity for us. But to do that, she has to get sign-on from a percentage of the provinces and which represent producers. So Alberta is a major player in getting those changes passed. So what she suggested was removal of the reference margin limit and increasing compensation from 70% to 80%. She needed a response from the provinces by the end of January, but she didn't get one. So we've been working with Minister Dreeshen to express our support for the project. Actually, his talk this morning was really good to hear. It was a very positive tone, which is slightly different from what we've heard in the past, but we're really excited about that. Now we know these changes, the reference margin limit and the increasing compensation, isn't gonna fix all of Aggro Stability, but the idea is that bringing dollars to producers in Alberta, federal dollars to Albertan producers, isn't a bad thing. And some of those changes, like the reference margin limit, is a major concern for cow-calf producers because it makes it hard for them to trigger compensation. So it'd be a step in the right direction. So we don't want to pass up this unprecedented midstream change. And that's why we've been pushing the government of Alberta to accept this. And we've been collaborating with a wide swath of the ag sector. So we did send in joint letters as well as with Canola, Pulse, all the other organizations, as well as Alberta cattle feeders. We've worked closely with them to show that this isn't just a change that would benefit cow-calf, it's a change that benefits all of the ag sector. Another business risk management we've been working on is LPI, formerly the WLPIP. So this is kind of under the umbrella of what Melanie talked about, and that we need a business risk management suite that actually helps producers mitigate some of the risk to their operation and to manage that risk. So there is still issues with LPI. Thankfully, they did extend the window to end of June and expire in February, which does free up some issues from producers. But we still need to tackle things like volatility control on premiums and different calving windows. So if you have fall calving, for example, which was pretty heavily hit and had a lack of mitigation during this last COVID cycle when we did see those high prices or low prices in April. And public land grazing has a bunch of issues, but one we really focused on was the disposition document. So Alberta Environment and Parks wanted to accelerate their renewal and assignment process because they had almost 2,000 dispositions in a backlog. And so this means that dispositions weren't being renewed or they weren't being able to be assigned. And that's because of the administrative process that they were doing to just renew those. So they wanted to change a form and make it much simpler, which was great. We're all for that. The only issue is we don't want any change that could impact a leaseholder's or the land manager's rights. So we worked with Western Stock Growers and Alberta Grazing Leaseholders Association to complete a form. The form that we completed achieved what Environment and Parks wanted, and that's modernize that there and address the backlog. They expect to address it by the end of April, as long as all the contracts are correctly filled out. But we also kept in the front end legal language or the recitals. We really pushed hard to keep this because that had been tried in court, and it showed that there was a legal right for the leaseholder to as property. And so we didn't want to lose that because it could have massive implications to a leaseholders tied to that land base. So that was a big win for us. There was some other added features, supplemental feeding, for example. You have to notify your agrologist in 7 days, and insurance is now required for bodily injury and property damage, and vehicle insurance. But that will come up at your renewal, and it'll be identified on your forum. Also, we sit on the public land for the Operational Grazing Advisory Committee. This is with Western Stock Growers, Northern Alberta Grazing Association, and Alberta Grazing Leaseholders Association. Last meeting focused mostly on trails and fees, which is a new act that's coming in that could impact how recreation occurs on public land. We wanted to make sure that the producers on public land aren't impacted. Luckily, grazing leases at this point are exempt and there will not be any trails on them, and we need to hold them to that. Another one is the dedicated, the range stewardship dedicated revenue. We've been working with the department to allocate these funds to projects. So 30% of rental above 2.9 million go to stewardship projects. That's not on an individual ranch basis, but it's for big picture items like education and research. This year we had a really quick submission cycle. So the projects maybe weren't as developed as they should have been, but going forward, we'll be working with the department to scope potential projects and make sure they meet the needs of producers. The priority setting for this committee is still ongoing, and it will be the focus of the next few meetings. So we'll be looking for the board to the board for ideas for that. Coal, this one kind of snuck up on us, quite honestly. So it was a precedent-setting issue where agricultural producers were affected by policy changes without consultation. So although ABP tried to take a stance where we were not against another industry just because we don't want to pick that fight, but at the same time, we want to make sure that those government policy decisions are made with a producer in mind. And so that's what we pushed the government for. And both Environment and Parks and Energy were very receptive to our feedback. And ultimately, as you may be aware, they did put those policy changes on hold until proper consultation could occur. Temporary foreign workers early in, so I guess background for that, in November 2020, there was restrictions placed on the temporary foreign workers program where they wouldn't allow the program to go forward for certain industries. So for example, restaurants were no longer allowed to recruit temporary foreign workers. Luckily, agriculture was exempt in November. So early in 2021, that exemption was up for review. We pushed that just because there's excess labor, or there's a labor force in urban areas that doesn't equate to filling the void in rural areas. And our exemption has been maintained. Going forward, we're working with on a committee with Minister of Agriculture and Forestry to address some of those rural labor issues. So wildlife, this is a big, broad issue. There's a bunch of issues under wildlife. Some of the main ones we've been working on is the mule deer management plan. The main issues within that would be chronic wasting disease as it grows and spreads within the province, and access. So we really don't want the recreational objectives of these management plans to impede on property rights or ability of land managers to properly manage their landscape and their stock. Another one is the predator project. So this was a project that's been in the works for quite a while, and it saw a win last fall where the Environment and Parks actually changed the wildlife regulation to allow third parties to inspect kills by predators. So no longer you wouldn't have to have fish and wildlife officers do the inspection. You could actually have neighbors, after they've taken a course, could do that inspection for you. So government has put that on us to develop that program, and it will be a priority going forward. It would be a similar program to BC where they're already implementing that. Some others in the wildlife area that we have within the radar and are starting to look more into are wild boar. Elk management and species at risk are not new projects, but they're ones that we're having to delve into just to keep the government on their toes. Yeah, any questions?
Thank you, Mark. Any questions for Mark at all? Fred, you have your hand up?
Hi, Mark. Yeah, thanks a lot. That's really great kind of quick overview of what files you're handling, and thanks for doing that. So I was happened to listen to CBC radio yesterday, and they're talking, of course, that camping opened up, right? So the guest they had on encouraged campers to get maps of Crown land and then go rough camping. So I suspect this is going to become a bigger file for you. I'm just wondering what you've heard about, we talked about this in the past year with coronavirus, just more people being on leased lands, not really knowing what guidelines they should follow when they go on those leased Crown lands. We've got a resolution on it too, I think.
Yes. So I think you're talking about a few things there. So there's capacity issues with the use of Crown land. And I think the department is aware. In our last Grazing Advisory Committee meeting, they did talk about like the phase 2 of the Trails Act, which would include the management of the volume. So not only where they're going, but how many are going, and looking at more booking systems. And then I think you're also indicating the education component. And that's something that we're pushing with the department as well, that though there is a lack of knowledge on how to properly use that land base. I know they did blitz last fall because they saw this coming, and we'll definitely engage with them to try to increase educational materials for this summer. I know traditionally with leases, the majority of activity has been in the fall with the hunting season, but you're right. It could be a new setting time with COVID and camping on grazing areas.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Fred. Mike Nadeau, I see you got your hand up there. I'll get to you next.
But thanks, Mark. Hey, just a question, I guess, about the predation verification process. What are the next steps there? Can you tell us what's coming or how that's going to work?
Yeah, so that building a program is the next step. They basically, well, they denied us the increase in compensation. So actually that program has kind of three components where there is increasing compensation, there is avoiding incidences, and the predator inspections. So the next step is developing a program on how the inspections can occur. It would be complicated. In BC, if we were to replicate that program, it's all run by the BC cattlemen, so the equivalent to Alberta beef producers, and they have a staff member who runs that program. And so that's what we need to hash out, is how we want the program to run. They have Environment and Parks has stated that they won't be running the program, but they could potentially support. So yeah, it's actually just development. I think once we have kind of our tiering committee and we have more of an oversight committee for that project, I think we can definitely launch into it.
Thank you, Mike. Rod, go ahead.
Yes, afternoon. Thanks for your presentation. I'm on the Aggro Stability side of the ledger here. So my understanding is that basically Alberta commodity groups are all in favor of a particular direction, but the elephant seems to be in the conversation that the provinces wanted the feds to pay more of their share. Because if we get this, then who's going to pay? That's the question we haven't heard about. If there is, removal of margin limits and all this, the bottom line means more money's coming out. Where's the money coming from?
That being said, for the funding model right now, it's unlikely to change. So BBO said that they would give forward that 60%, and it would just be that 40% from the provinces that would be remaining. I've heard different numbers, but if we made it retroactive for 2020, that payout would be between 7 and 12 million for the province of Alberta. So it isn't a huge number in comparison with other programs. So as for the budget scenario, yeah, that might come from other programs, but we're not sure. So Minister said he was taking it to Treasury Board, and it could go a few different ways, where they just give him the money and there's no program cutting, or they could not give him money, but they approve it and he has to cut other programs for it. That being said, those discussions haven't really been had. That might be what he discusses at the FPT meetings, is that they would only pay 20% or something like that.
Thank you, Rod. I see Lee, Graham, Jim, and Chris's screen on. You one of you four have a question?
Sure. Have you heard, Mark, from any of the guys down south on the coal issue that want the coal to go through on the Old Man River because of their issues with the discarded mines down there have been walked away, and now they're creating their own environmental hazard? Have you talked to any of those guys down there yet?
You're saying people that are pro coal?
Yep, ranching families that are pro coal. They want them in there to clean up the old mines that have been just discarded and then leaching. Have you made any contact with those guys? Because they're beef producers down there too, and they really want to talk to everybody at the table.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think that's kind of the stance we took, is we didn't want to say be anti-coal or pro-coal. What we did is say you need to talk to the producers and you need to talk to the impacted parties. And that's what we really tried to push the province for, is that it's not just that we don't want coal. There's definite benefits, but that needs to be assessed before any policy decisions or approvals are made. But no, I have not personally had conversations with them.
It may be something you want to talk to those guys about because they're feeling a little left out by ABP right now.
Okay, for sure. Maybe we could talk after and I could get some names and contact information.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Mark? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate all your work on all those files. You get your work cut out for you.